You, me, and everyone in America just got a whole lot safer because of something the United States Supreme Court just did. And I'm willing to bet that you probably never even heard about this because it hasn't been headline news. It probably didn't come up on your phone, but it will affect you almost every single day of your life. Now, to be clear, when I say the Supreme Court, I don't mean some state Supreme Court. I don't mean some regional appellate court. I don't mean whatever the heck New York calls their Supreme Court. I actually mean the United States Supreme Court, the highest court in all the land. The very same court that gave us Brown versus Board of Education, the famous 1950s era Supreme Court case that ended racial segregation in our schools. One of the most famous legal cases in U.S. history. And just like Brown v. Board, this new decision was 9 justices to 0. All 9 agreed. Conservative? Liberal? It didn't matter. They all said the same thing. You know how rare that is? In a country this divided, 9 justices agreeing on anything feels like a miracle. But they did. And what they agreed on is going to help take away a danger that affects nearly everyone in America. But most of us never even realized it was there. Now, I want you to imagine something for me. There's a danger lurking near you. You can't see it. There's no warning light. There's no flashing danger zone sign. No alarm. And at any moment, without any notice whatsoever, it could seriously hurt you or even kill you. If you've seen the TV series Walking Dead, you know about the hordes of zombies. But sometimes the most dangerous zombies were the ones lurking right behind you, or under the water or in the weeds that the characters couldn't see. The one you never heard sneaking up. That's what this danger's like. It's been on the road. It's been on the highway right next to you. And you had no idea it was even there. And here's the thing. Almost every single one of us are on the road almost every single day. Whether it's in a car, on a motorcycle, a bicycle, walking, you name it, we use the roads every day. Our streets, our roads, our highways, they're just a part of our life. And yes, of course, we already know roads have dangers. We have to watch traffic signals. We have to watch our speed. We have to maintain our car. We have to watch out for children, pedestrians, motorcycles, kids on e-bikes. We know all of that already. We're well aware of all those dangers. And of course, we know that big trucks are dangerous too. You may call them semi-trucks, 18-wheelers, big rigs, tractor trailers, whatever you call them. There is one thing that's very clear. They're too big to mess around with. They weigh up to 80,000 pounds. They take a whole football field sometimes to stop. They make really wide turns. They have all these blind spots where they can't see around them. But you know that already. And you already know you have to respect that. But there's another danger about these trucks. A more insidious danger. Something hidden. And for this danger, you would have no way to protect yourself from it. What if I told you some of those trucks right next to you, right next to your family, on the highway, you look over to the right, you see them. The brakes might not work right. The driver may not have slept for 2 days. The company may not have properly maintained that truck for months. Trucks with what the federal government would call a conditional safety rating. That's basically the government's way of saying this truck's got problems. Problems with driver qualifications, problems with hours of service, meaning how long has that driver driven without getting some sleep, and most importantly, perhaps problems with crash history. They get into a lot of accidents, this truck. You see, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, the FMCSA, they actually keep a public database. It tracks every single licensed truck company in America. And it actually has its own scoring system, like a report card. It's called the SMS, the Safety Measurement System. And it measures things like unsafe driver behavior, whether drivers are sleeping enough, driver fitness, meaning not are they in good shape, but are they even qualified to drive these large, very difficult to maneuver vehicles? Vehicle maintenance. It's more than brakes, right? There's a lot of things that need to work properly. A lot of components have to work properly and be maintained to make sure that big rig is running safely down the highway. And of course, crash history. How many accidents has that truck been in? Has that driver been in? And how many were his or her fault? The information actually is right there. Anyone can look it up. It's publicly available. But here's where it gets even more sinister. Some companies, they just never clean up their act. They pile up safety violation after safety violation. And then all of a sudden, poof, they disappear. But they're not gone for long. They shut down their company and they create a brand new LLC, get a brand new DOT number from the government, and their entire history of crashes, violations, failures, wiped clean, gone, at least on paper. In the trucking industry, they call these chameleon carriers. Similar to a chameleon, changing its colors to blend in. Same dangerous operation, brand new disguise. Same bad drivers. Same poorly maintained trucks. Just a new name. And again, if you're just a regular driver driving down the road, you have no way of knowing which of these trucks or these chameleon carriers or otherwise have a whole history of safety violations. There's no scarlet letter on the side door, no warning on the license plate, nothing. So here's the question that should be burning through your mind right now. If someone can look this up, if someone can actually identify these chameleon carriers before giving them work, if someone can actually take a look at their safety history, if someone had the tools, the access, and the incentive to identify these dangerous trucks, these chameleon carriers, before they even ever got on the road, well, why wouldn't they? Let me introduce you to someone you probably never even thought about before. The freight broker. You know that Amazon package sitting on a front porch right now? Or the toilet paper on the shelf at the grocery store? Or even the car parts they had to get to the dealership before they could fix your car? None of that stuff moves itself. Most of these companies that make and sell these things, they don't own their own fleet of trucks. So how does it get from the warehouse in, say, Ohio to your house or to your neighborhood store? Well, one of the ways it gets there is someone called a freight broker. Here's the freight broker's world. The phone rings. It's a big retailer. They've got 40,000 pounds of goods sitting in a warehouse somewhere, and those goods have to be at a distribution center in 3 days. The broker's job? Find a truck, get the goods there, done. And these brokers, they're typically not mom and pop operations. I mean, C.H. Robinson, who was the defendant in this big Supreme Court case, they are the largest freight broker in the U.S. We're talking about a company that arranges over 20 million shipments per year. Billions of dollars moving across America's highways every single day. Now here's where it gets important, because when a freight broker gets one of those jobs, he has access to all this information about all the possible trucking companies he or she can use to move this load, including the FMCSA scores. Those are the ones I just told you about. The ones that track crash history, whether a driver's been sleeping, whether a truck's been maintained, whether a certain company or a driver have an unsafe driving record. A broker can literally pull up any trucking company in America and see whether they have a poor score. Simple, right? Green means good, red means bad. And red means the government has flagged a problem with that particular carrier. And now we get back to this conditional rating. A conditional rating means the government has found this carrier can still drive, but they have problems. The brokers, they can see all this, all of it, before they make a decision about who's going to haul those goods for its client, before they make that phone call to hire that trucking company. So picture the broker. We all have tough jobs, right? He's got 12 loads. He's got a place by the end of the day. His phone is ringing off the hook. His client wants to pay cheaper rates. His client wants the job done now, and right there in front of his face is staring at him a very cheap rate, but that carrier has a conditional rating. That carrier's got some safety problems. Still legal though. Now to be clear, I'm not saying every broker is a villain. Most of them are just doing their job like all of us, under pressure to move this product as fast and as cheaply and as efficiently as possible. But when there are no consequences for ignoring these red flags, when federal law gave them a shield that basically said, you can't be sued for this, don't worry about it, then in that case, you already know what happens. You've seen it in every area of life. When there's no consequence, then the shortcut becomes the habit. The red flag, that's background noise. The dangerous carrier gets the load, and then it gets on the road right next to you. Until now. I want to tell you about a man named Sean Montgomery. It's December 7th, 2017, Illinois. Interstate 70. His car has got a mechanical problem, so he pulled over, like any of us would, to the side of the road. He stopped, on the shoulder, out of the way. He's done everything right. But then suddenly, a tractor trailer operated by a company called Caribe Transport II veers off the side of the road and slams in the back of his vehicle. Sean Montgomery lost his leg that day. Obviously, he suffered a permanent and life-altering injury. And he wanted to know, why did this happen? How did this sequence of events lead to me having my leg amputated? Because all I did was pull over the side of the road to try to fix my car. Now, of course, he sued the driver. He sued the trucking company. And of course, that's the obvious move, right? Go after the people directly involved in the crash. But here's the problem. Federal law only requires trucking companies to carry a minimum of $750,000 in insurance. That sounds like a lot of money, right? Until you've lost your leg. Until you've added up a lifetime of medical bills and surgeries and pain and suffering and prosthetics and on and on and on. So for catastrophic injuries, which is what you would call this kind of situation, $750,000 is just a drop in the bucket. And especially a lot of these small trucking companies, these small carriers, they of course carry the minimum required insurance and not a penny more. And so when the dust settled, and you looked at what Caribe Transport had to compensate Mr. Montgomery for losing his leg, it wasn't enough. And it's often not enough. And the truck driver himself, he's not going to have deep pockets. So Sean had a good attorney. He looked up the chain. Who else was responsible for putting this driver and this truck on the road that day? Who had the ability to stop this before it happened? And that's when the freight broker entered the picture. So here's what the investigation revealed. C.H. Robinson was the freight broker that arranged this particular load. They assigned the load to Caribe Transport, the trucking company. And at the time that the freight broker made that assignment, the trucking company Caribe had a conditional safety rating. The government had flagged them as deficient in driver qualifications, hours of service compliance, and crash rates. The information was available. C.H. Robinson could have seen it. They should have seen it and used it to make a different choice. But they didn't. So Sean Montgomery did what any American has the right to do. He took the freight broker to court. He sued C.H. Robinson. He said, "You're the largest freight broker in the country. You had access to the carrier's safety record. You knew, or at least you should have known, that they were unsafe. And your choice to put that dangerous truck on the road for your client caused me to lose my leg." And the trial court threw his case out. And the appellate court, the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals in Chicago, they said, yeah, your case is out. Why? Well, because of a little-known federal law called the FAAAA. It's a mouthful, right? The Federal Aviation Administration Authorization Act. And you may be saying, what does this have to do with airplanes? But don't let the name fool you. The act actually covers trucking too. And it has a provision that says federal law overrides, or the proper term is preempts, state law when it comes to services related to transportation of goods. So, of course, C.H. Robinson is going to say, our services are regulated by the federal government, so you can't sue us for negligence under state law. Federal law protects us. Case dismissed. Sean Montgomery lost his leg, and 2 different courts told me he couldn't even have his day in court against the broker who put that dangerous truck on the road. So he did what you do when you know you're right. He took it all the way to the Supreme Court. But here's where it gets really interesting. This is something called a circuit split. Let me explain what that means in plain English. The United States is actually divided into 12 different federal circuit courts of appeal. Each one covers a certain region or chunk of the country. And all 12 of those courts of appeal answer to the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. And before this case reached the Supreme Court, other circuit courts of appeal had actually looked at the exact same issue, but for other cases. Can you sue a freight broker under state negligence law for choosing a dangerous carrier or truck driving company? And these other courts of appeal had actually come to opposite conclusions. The 6th Circuit, covering Ohio, Michigan, Tennessee, and Kentucky, and the 9th Circuit, covering California, Washington, Oregon, and more, they both said yes. Yes, you can sue the freight broker if he's been negligent and chose a dangerous carrier. Those claims are not preempted by federal law, according to those circuits. But on the other hand, the 7th Circuit, for instance, covering Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin — Illinois, by the way, was where Mr. Montgomery is from — and the 11th Circuit, covering Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, they disagreed. They thought that federal law would block those claims, that those claims were preempted. So if your case came up in those states, your case would be dismissed. So if you got hurt by a truck that shouldn't have been on the road and was because of a negligent broker decision, but you lived in California, then yes, you could sue. Your claims were not preempted. If you lived in Illinois, like Mr. Montgomery did, then the 7th Circuit that covered Illinois said your claims were preempted and your case would be dismissed. Same facts, same law, but different result depending on which state you lived in. That's not justice. And the Supreme Court agreed to take this case on, because the Supreme Court does actually not take all their cases that people try to petition the Supreme Court to take. But they took this case on specifically to resolve that conflict between the different circuit courts. So once and for all, the same law would apply in all 50 states. On May 14th, 2026, the United States Supreme Court issued its decision. 9 justices, 0 dissents. The opinion was written by Justice Amy Coney Barrett, and the message was clear. Negligent hiring claims against freight brokers fall under the safety exception to federal preemption law. In other words, a freight broker can't hide behind some obscure federal preemption law when they knowingly or negligently allow a dangerous carrier, a truck driving company, to take their clients' goods on America's roads. Translation: Mr. Sean Montgomery, who the case is named after, gets his day in court against that freight broker. But more importantly, every freight broker in America now just woke up, because now they have a new reason to care about the safety records of the truck driving companies that they hire. So now let's tie it all together. Why does a freight broker opinion by the United States Supreme Court save your life? Well, it's because of incentives. Before this ruling, a broker could look at a carrier, truck driving company with a bad record, conditional safety rating, driver qualification issues, past crashes, and say, well, I mean, technically they're legal and they're cheap. I'll use them. And if something did go wrong, well, depending on what state they were in, I got federal preemption to protect me. I'm not going to get sued. That is no longer the case. You remember at the top of this video when I was talking about Walking Dead, and the biggest danger from zombies often was the one right behind you, or hiding in the weeds, under the water, the one you couldn't see sneaking up on you. Well, the Supreme Court just deputized every freight broker in America to be your Daryl Dixon, to protect you from those unknown zombies out there on the road. And believe me, not because the brokers want to, not out of the goodness of their hearts, but because now, if they hand the keys to a dangerous carrier and someone gets hurt, they're on the hook, and they can be held responsible in a court of law. The Supreme Court, they handed brokers a hot poker. Now, when a broker sits down to match a load with the carrier, they can't just chase the cheapest price and ignore the red flags. They gotta check those safety scores. They gotta vet those carriers. And most importantly, they just gotta ask the question, is this a trucking company that we would feel safe putting on the road next to our family? Because if they don't, now they got skin in the game. They own what may happen next. And in America, nothing, and I mean nothing, changes behavior faster than knowing you might get sued. Remember those chameleon carriers I told you about earlier? The ones who close up, open up under a brand new name with all the same people and all the same safety problems? Well, these freight brokers are now going to be doing proper diligence to watch out for those chameleon carriers too, because they know they can be held liable if they don't. So what all this comes down to is now we're going to see more vetting, more scrutiny, and more safety. And that's whether the freight brokers want that or not. And listen, this doesn't mean that every broker is going to be on the hook for every accident. That wouldn't be fair either. They're not driving the truck. They're not running the trucking companies. And Justice Barrett, who wrote this opinion, was clear. Brokers that act reasonably and select reputable carriers are going to have a chance to defend themselves. But that free pass, That blanket federal preemption shield that let negligent brokers hide behind a technicality while victims like Sean Montgomery could not even get into a courtroom? That's gone forever. Sean Montgomery lost his leg on an Illinois highway. He fought through a trial court. He fought through the Court of Appeals. He took it all the way to the top. And all 9 Supreme Court justices unanimously said, yeah, you deserve your day in court, Mr. Montgomery, because someone in a position to know better put a dangerous truck on the road. The roads aren't perfectly safe. They never will be. But because of what happened on May 14th of this year in Washington, D.C. at the Supreme Court, the people who have the power to screen out these dangerous trucks before they ever leave the lot with their clients' goods now have a very powerful reason, a very powerful incentive to actually do so. The Supreme Court may have just saved your life, and you didn't even know it was in danger. If you or a loved one has been seriously injured in a truck accident, I want you to know your rights. Call us. The link's in the description. Consultations are free. And if this video actually helped you understand something you didn't know before, please hit the like button, hit subscribe to our channel, and share with someone who drives on the road, which is basically everyone you know, and I'll see you in the next one.